Okay, chapter 35. When we last left off, they were floating over New York City, and an airplane had flown really close to the peach and cut all of the strings holding the seagulls to the peach. So now the peach was falling quickly towards Earth. And if you'll remember, the people in New York City thought the peach was a giant bomb sent to destroy New York City. Round and upside down went the peach as it plummeted towards the earth, and they were all clinging desperately to the stem to save themselves from being flung into space. Faster and faster it fell, down and down and down, racing closer and closer to the houses and streets below, where it would surely smash into a million pieces when it hit. And all the way along Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue, and along all the other streets in New York City, people who had not yet reached the underground shelters looked up and saw it coming, and they stopped running and stood there staring in a sort of stupor at what they thought was the biggest bomb in all the world falling out of the sky onto their heads. A few women screamed. Others knelt down the sidewalks and began praying aloud. Strong men turned to one another and said things like, "Well, I guess this is it, Joe," and "Goodbye, everybody, goodbye." And for the next 30 seconds, the whole city held its breath, waiting for the end to come. Chapter 36. "Goodbye, Ladybird," gasped James, clinging to the stem of the falling peach. "Goodbye, Centipede. Goodbye, everybody." There were only a few seconds to go now, and it looked as though they were going to fall right in among all the tallest buildings. James could see the skyscrapers rushing up to meet them at the most awful speed, and most of them had square, flat tops, but the very tallest of them all had a top that tapered off to a long, sharp point, the Empire State Building, like an enormous silver needle sticking up into the sky. And it was precisely onto the top of this needle that the peach fell. There was a squelch. The needle went in deep, and suddenly there was the giant peach, caught and spiked upon the very pinnacle of the Empire State Building. Chapter 37. It was really an amazing sight. Oops, can you see it? It was really an amazing sight, and in 2 or 3 minutes, as soon as the people below realized that this now couldn't possibly be a bomb, they came pouring out of the shelters and the subways to gape at the marvel. That means to stare and wonder at this crazy thing. The streets for half a mile around the building were jammed with men and women, and when the word spread that there were actually living things moving about on top of the great round ball, then everyone went wild with excitement. "It's a flying saucer," they shouted. "They are from outer space. They are men from Mars, or maybe they came from the moon." And a man who had a pair of binoculars to his eyes said, "They look pretty peculiar to me, I'll tell you that." Now remember, peculiar means strange or unusual. Police cars and fire engines came screaming in from all over the city and pulled up outside the Empire State Building. 200 firemen and 600 policemen swarmed into the building and went up in the elevators as high as they could go. Then they poured out onto the observation roof, which is the place where tourists stand just at the bottom of the big spike. All the policemen were holding their guns at the ready with their fingers on the triggers, and the firemen were clutching their hatchets. So the hatchet is the axe that firemen have sometimes. But from where they stood, almost directly underneath the peach, they couldn't actually see the travelers up on top. "Ahoy there!" shouted the chief of police. "Come out and show yourselves." Suddenly, the great brown head of the centipede appeared over the side of the peach. His black eyes, as large and round as 2 marbles, glared down at the policemen and the firemen below. Then his monstrous, ugly head broke into a wide grin. The policemen and the firemen all started shouting at once. "Look out!" they cried. "It's a dragon!" "It's not a dragon, it's a wampus!" "It's a gorgon!" "It's a sea serpent!" "It's a proc!" "It's a manticore!" 3 firemen and 5 policemen fainted and had to be carried away. It's a snozwanger, cried the chief of police. It's a wangdoodle, yelled the head of the fire department. The centipede, of course, kept on grinning. He seemed to be enjoying enormously the commotion that he was causing. Now see here, shouted the chief of police, cupping his hands to his mouth. You listen to me. I want you to tell me exactly where you've come from. We've come from thousands of miles away, the centipede shouted back, grinning more broadly than ever and showing his brown teeth. There you are. There you are. There you are, called the chief of police. I told you they came from Mars. I guess you're right, said the head of the fire department. At this point, the old green grasshopper poked his huge green head over the side of the peach alongside the centipedes. 6 more big, strong men fainted when they saw him. That one's an oink, screamed the head of the fire department. I just know it's an oink. It's a cockatrice, yelled the chief of police. Stand back, men, it may jump down on us at any moment. What on earth are they talking about? The old green grasshopper said to the centipede. Search me, said the centipede, but they seem to be in an awful stew about something. Then Miss Spider's large, black, murderous-looking head, which to a stranger was probably the most terrifying of all, appeared next to the grasshoppers. Snakes and ladders, yelled the head of the fire department. We are finished now. It's a giant scorpula. It's worse than that, cried the chief of police. It's a vermicious nid. Oh, just look at its vermicious, gruesome face. Is that the kind that eats fully grown men for breakfast? The head of the fire department asked, going white as a sheet. I'm afraid it is, the chief of police answered. Oh, please, why doesn't someone help us to get down from here? Miss Spider called out. It's making me giddy. In this case, giddy means dizzy. And there they all are, fainting every time some new bug pokes his head up over the side of the peach. This could be a trick, said the head of the fire department. Don't anybody make a move until I say. They've probably got space guns, said the chief of police. Well, we've got to do something, the head of the fire department announced grimly. About 5 million people are standing down there on the streets watching us. Then why don't you put a ladder up? The chief of police asked him. I'll stand at the bottom and hold it steady for you while you go up and see what's happening. Thanks very much, snapped the head of the fire department. Soon there were no less than 7 large, fantastic faces peering down over the side of the peach. The centipedes, the old green grasshoppers, Miss Spiders, the earthworms, the ladybirds, the silkworms, and the glowworms. And a sort of panic was beginning to break out among the firemen and the policemen on the roof. Then, all at once, the panic stopped, and a great gasp of astonishment went up all around. For now a small boy was seen to be standing up there beside the other creatures. His hair was blowing in the wind, and he was laughing and waving and calling out, Hello, everybody! Hello! For a few moments the men below just stood and stared and gaped. They just simply couldn't believe their eyes. Bless my soul, cried the head of the fire department, going red in the face. It really is a little boy, isn't it? Don't be frightened of us, please, James called out. We are so glad to be here. What about those others around you? Shouted the chief of police. Are any of them dangerous? Of course they're not dangerous, James answered. They're the nicest creatures in the world. Allow me to introduce them to you one by one, and then I'm sure you will believe me. Okay, we have a song here, of course. My friends, this is the centipede, and let me make it known. He is so sweet and gentle that, although he's overgrown, the Queen of Spain again and again has summoned him by phone to babysit and sing and knit and be a chaperone. When nurse is off and all the royal children are alone. Small wonder, said a fireman, they're no longer on the throne. The earthworm, on the other hand, said James, beginning to expand, is great for digging up the land and making old soils newer. Moreover, you should understand he would be absolutely grand for digging subway tunnels and for making you a sewer. The earthworm blushed and beamed with pride. Miss Spider clapped and cheered and cried, "Could any words be truer?" And the grasshopper, ladies and gents, is a boon in millions and millions of ways. You have only to ask him to give you a tune, and he plays and he plays and he plays. As a toy for your children, he's perfectly sweet. There's nothing so good in the shops. You've only to tickle the soles of his feet, and he hops and he hops and he hops. He can't be very fierce, exclaimed the head of all the cops. And now, without excuse, I'd like to introduce this charming glowworm, lover of simplicity. She is easy to install on your ceiling or your wall, and all this smacks a bit of eccentricity. It's really rather clever, for thereafter you will never have the slightest need for using electricity. At which no less than 52 policemen cried, "If this is true, that creature will get some fabulous publicity." And here we have Miss Spider with a mile of thread inside her, who has personally requested me to say that she's never met Miss Muffet. On her charming little tuffet, if she had, she'd not have frightened her away. Should her looks sometimes alarm you, then I don't think it would harm you to repeat at least 100 times a day, "I must never kill a spider. I must only help and guide her, and invite her in the nursery to play." The police all nodded slightly, and the fireman smiled politely, and about a dozen people shouted, "Hooray!" And here's my darling ladybird, so beautiful, so kind, my greatest comfort since this trip began. She has 400 children, and she's left them all behind, but they're coming on the next peach of the can. The cops cried, "She's entrancing!" All the firemen started dancing, and the crowds I started cheering to a man. "And now the silkworm," James went on, "whose silk will bear comparison with all the greatest silks there are in Rome and Philadelphia. If you would search the whole world through, from Paraguay to Timbuktu, I don't believe you would find one bed of silk that could compare with it. Even the shops in Singapore don't have the stuff, and what is more, this silkworm have, you know, the honor not so long ago to spin and weave and sew and press the Queen of England's wedding dress, and she's already made and sent a waistcoat for your president." "Well, good for her," the cops cried out, and all at once a mighty shout went up around the Empire State. "Let's get them down! At once! Why wait?" And that takes us to chapter 38 to continue the rhyme, but that'll have to wait till another day. All right, thank you very much. Till next time.